Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's World Affairs Council of Charlotte Distinguished Speaker Program. My name is Algey Stanbrook, and I'm the President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. Today, we have the incredible honor to have with us a legend of the State Department, U.S. history, Ambassador Ryan Crocker. Ambassador Ryan Crocker, some of you who are with us today may remember, was with us on September the 5th of 2018, and we have great photos and memories of that visit. Actually, Ambassador Crocker was our guest also before that here in Charlotte, and we do hope that we'll have the ability to host him here in Charlotte once again once the COVID pandemic is over. So Ambassador Ryan Crocker, as I said, career diplomat and U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan twice, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Kuwait, and Lebanon. He is going to a very, very, very hot topic, very current topic, making sense of Afghanistan. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for being with us, but also I would like to thank the World Affairs Council corporate sponsors, the ambassadors, Bank of America, Noah Hell, Envoys, Atrium Health, diplomats, DHG, PDM, Rogers, and SPX Flow. Thank you very much for your support of the World Affairs Council. As you know, the World Affairs Council of Charlotte is the community's premier global education, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we have always sought to bring the world closer to you and to build a community of internationally informed and engaged citizens. Dialogue, knowledge, active participation, and an understanding of global issues are vitally important for our democracy to flourish at all levels. Thank you all for being here and supporting the World Affairs Council. Now, a couple of housekeeping elements that we need to go through. Your microphone will be on mute and your camera will be turned off for the duration of the presentation. Please do submit a question to Ambassador Crocker, and you can do it anytime. Please use the question and answer box in the Zoom toolbar. You can see it encircled in red. Try not to use the chat box. It's for chatting box. And again, we have it marked for ease of use. This presentation will be recorded, and we will share it with all of you today and with all of the World Affairs Council members and supporters, but please make sure that we have your correct email so that you will indeed receive this presentation on your email link. A couple of upcoming programs on September 28th and 29th. We have a private dinner and CEO series with Dr. Udo Lang. He's the president CEO of FedEx Logistics. He's going to speak on FedEx, mastering highly complex global logistic challenges amplified by a pandemic. As you know, the car chips and many other things are not on shelves because of the pandemic, and it is a nightmare of global logistics. So a very timely conversation with Dr. Udo Lang. On November 3rd and 4th, we have a private dinner and CEO series with Chuck Harrington. He's executive chairman and CEO of Parsons Corporation. He just stepped down as CEO, and he has a lot to share with us about what's happening in the world of multinationals and global business. And then on November 16th or 19th, 2021, the World Affairs Council of America Annual National Conference, and December 8 to 9, 2021, World Affairs Council private dinner and Ambassador Circle series with His Excellency Taranjit Singh Sandhu, the Ambassador of India to the United States. If you are on social media, please do find the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. Please like, share, and follow us, and we do appreciate your support. A little bit about Ambassador Ryan Crocker. Again, most of you have been with us when Ambassador Crocker visited Charlotte a couple of times in the past. But let me share with you that currently he's a non-resident senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Other academic appointments have included diplomat in residence at Princeton University, inaugural Kissinger Fellow at Yale University, the James Schlesinger Distinguished Visiting Professor at the University of Virginia and Texas A&M, where he was Dean of the Bush School of Government. Ambassador Crocker was a career Foreign Service officer who served 6 times as American ambassador in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Kuwait, and Lebanon. He serves on the board of advisors of No One Left Behind, an NGO dedicated to ensuring that America keeps its promises to Afghans and Iraqis who risked their lives to support us. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, in 2009. Other recent awards include the West Point Association of Graduates Pair Award in 2020 and the inaugural Bancroft Award presented by the Naval Academy in 2016. Also in 2016, he was named an honorary fellow of the Literary and Historical Society at University College Dublin, where he was presented the annual James Joyce Award. He is an honorary Marine, and let me just share with everyone that some years ago, I was the guest of Ambassador Crocker in the embassy in Kabul to firsthand witness all the good things that we have had done in Afghanistan to help the local population. I was one of a group of delegates, 6 delegates from the World Affairs Council of America. And we have with us, one of them, Ken First, is one of our participants here today. So hello, Ken. We have memories of that visit. Thank you for hosting us then, Ambassador Crocker. I would like to introduce to you Dr. David Calloway, who is going to be the moderator of this conversation. Dr. Calloway is with Atrium Health, and he is also on the board of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. Thank you for being here as well, Dr. Calloway. And without further ado, Ambassador Ryan Crocker, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks very much for having me, LJ. It's a pleasure to be back, even if only virtually. And we all look forward to better times when we can actually move around our great country freely once again. I'm always pleased to receive invitations from World Affairs Councils. They play a critical role in American society with just about 100 chapters nationwide. They are the preeminent conduit, if you will, from the foreign policy and national security world in which the United States government is such a major actor, and the American people. And as the world gets more and more complicated, and as the issues become more complex and less intuitive, and frankly, as our core of international journalists and correspondents continues to shrink, that role has never been more important. And I've got a particular admiration for the Charlotte Council. You punch with, I won't say above your weight, you got a lot of weight, and you use it. It's clearly one of the more vibrant and effective councils worldwide, headed by LJ, of course, who will do really daring things like actually come to Afghanistan. And what a difference that makes when you can see it on the ground for yourself and come to your own conclusions, as the council does so well. And it is about Afghanistan, of course, today. Afghanistan relates to any number of other issues that we will get into. It's not during my monologue when we get to your questions, and that's going to be important. It is a hinge point in history, I think. What we've seen now over certainly this past month in Afghanistan. Where will it go? What is its significance? That will be kind of hard to figure out, and it will take time. But it is the gift that we'll keep on giving, of that I'm reasonably certain. So just to back up a bit, as we are now at the 20th anniversary, of course, of the 9/11 attacks, that is the moment to reflect. What happened then? How did we respond to it? How could we have responded to it? How did our mission in Afghanistan and our presence evolve over time? And most importantly, what now? We're out. We're all the way out. The Taliban is in, all the way in. What's next? And I'll at least try. I won't have the answers. Let me be clear on that up front, but at least we can together pose the questions and wonder and think a bit about where the answers may come from. So those tuned in who are old enough to remember 9/11 will always remember where they were that day and what that initial impact was. My my role that day, I had just very recently returned to Washington, joined the State Department. I'd been ambassador to Syria previously. I was back in Washington for one of my only two-year State Department tours. My motto has always been anywhere but Washington. And I was actually on a US Air shuttle that morning, flying up to New York for meetings with the Russian perm rep to the United Nations, now foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. And the conversation was not going to be about Afghanistan, it was going to be about Iraq. The way the State Department is organized, the dividing line between the Near East Bureau, where I was Deputy Assistant Secretary, and the South Asia Bureau, in which Afghanistan was situated, was right along that eastern border of Iran, with Iran and Near Eastern responsibility, Afghanistan, Pakistan, a South Asian responsibility. It was a brilliant blue September morning, as we all recall, up in New York. So we were making our approach over Manhattan. Somebody said, "Look, there's smoke coming out of the World Trade Center." You know, we all gawked at that. Kind of somebody, I think, spoke for us all. How could you run a plane into the World Trade Center on a morning like this? No, we got that answer just as we touched down to the news that the second tower had been hit. This was no accident. I grabbed a cab and tried to get over to Manhattan, got hopelessly snarled in traffic on the Queensboro Bridge. And it was from that vantage point I saw both towers go down. Eventually got back to Long Island and the Avis car rental folks, who had one left, which I then drove off of Long Island at Orient Point, the ferry there, and then the long drive back to DC. And as I proceeded, I thought, I had an answer to a question that had been puzzling me for the previous day or so, which was the assassination of Ahmad Shah Massoud, the military leader of Afghanistan's Northern Alliance. As the Taliban surged through Afghanistan in the mid-1990s, what became known as the Northern Alliance were able to hang on to about 20% of the country up in the Northeast. Again, under the able and charismatic leadership of Ahmad Shah Massoud. The puzzling event was his assassination by two suicide bombers posing as an Arab TV crew there to interview him. And when I got that news, I kind of wondered, wow, that's a pretty complex operation, sort of an Al-Qaeda thing. Why would they want or need to do that? Well, I had my answer. They wanted him off the field after or before the attacks took place. They weren't dumb, obviously, in Al-Qaeda. They knew that we would trace it back to them and that we would seek revenge. And they wanted to do everything they could to weaken our objective in-country ally, the Northern Alliance. So that was the first thing I worked through. The second thing was, well, this is not an NEA issue, but I bet you it's really going to change my life. And I was right about that too. As it transpired, I spent basically 7 years of the first decade after 9/11 in Pakistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, all three as the American ambassador. I mean, it was the trifecta from hell. That I did not foresee, but I knew that whether nationally or personally, what I had just personally witnessed in New York was that hinge of history. It didn't take too long to see those changes. There had been in existence previously something called the Geneva Group that was chaired by Lakhdar Brahimi of the United Nations, met in Geneva, hence the name. And it included the United States, Germany, Italy, and Iran. And the logic behind it was that all four countries played a significant role in the Afghanistan issue, whether as home to many Afghan refugees, in the case of Germany and Iran, or again, whether it had another linkage. Case of Italy, that is where the Afghan royal family was living after they had been pushed out in the early 70s from Afghanistan. But mainly it was an opportunity for the US and Iran to have direct contact. There weren't many such opportunities. I didn't even know about it. It was a South Asia thing, and it wasn't considered significantly important to have much notice in the department. After 9/11, it did. We wanted to talk to the Iranians, and they wanted to talk to us. Taliban now being the enemy of both. We had some very interesting and fruitful discussions, actually, in the months ahead, culminating in the assignment simultaneously of their chief negotiator as Iranian ambassador to Afghanistan, and me as the first chargé d'affaires to open the embassy in early January 2002. So that was my introduction to Afghanistan. And I remember clearly that landing in a UN plane up at Bagram, Kabul airport was closed with its cratered runways and pieces of airplanes scattered about. So one flew into Bagram and then made that long journey down to Kabul through fields of mud, devastated dwellings. There was nothing there, nothing living. Kabul itself looked like Berlin in 1945, whole blocks reduced to rubble. We didn't do it. The Taliban didn't do it. The Russians didn't do it. The Afghans did it to themselves in the civil war of the early 1990s, culminating in the Taliban takeover. What brought me there? What brought the United States there? Well, again, 9/11. Pretty darn clear that we had a strategic issue and interest in Afghanistan traced back to Al-Qaeda able to operate under Taliban protection with the space, freedom, and security to design those complex attacks. So it was all about national security. Indeed, we gave the Taliban an option after 9/11. We said, hand over Al-Qaeda's leaders, and if you do, we're going to leave you alone. We were not going to build a nation. We were going to protect America, and that certainly was the theme of my relatively brief period in Afghanistan at that time. But it was also, again, very clear to me when I went back as ambassador a decade later, 2011, 2012. And that of course, is when LJ and others, including Ken First, came out to visit and see for themselves what was going on there, what we were doing, and why we were doing it. In this sense, it differed hugely from Iraq. Nothing had made a lethal visit to us out of Iraq, although the administration tried to portray it so. In Afghanistan, they had. And that was, again, the mission, never again. You then had some disagreements over time over the best means to that end. Just, do you restrict it to a pure counterterrorism mission and really do nothing for the betterment of the Afghan people? Do you go all out to transform society, or do you try to find something in the middle? The notion that we went there, again, to build a nation is just got it strategically wrong. We went there to protect our own nation. How best to do it was a question of ways and means, not ends in themselves. And I think that is very important as we look at what we're facing today. The original plan was to be as light as we could be in terms of footprint. We were never an occupying power in Afghanistan, not legally and not de facto as we were in Iraq. Indeed, when I arrived, the totality of US regular forces in country consisted of exactly one Marine Expeditionary Unit and its battalion landing team. And with that, the way they were configured then, it was about 6,000 Marines. That was it. No regular Army units, special forces, of course, but it was a very light footprint and would continue to be so for some time. And again, in the area of why were we there? 6 months after 9/11, on March 11, 2002, we had a brief ceremony at the embassy flagpole to inter a piece of the World Trade Center that 5th Special Forces Group had brought to Afghanistan with them. Several pieces, actually, that were embedded in Afghan soil, the other end of ground zero, if you will. So that salience of national security was established, repeated, and repeated again by folks who understood what the stakes there were. As we look at the issues there, I think LJ may have circulated an op-ed I did for the New York Times a few weeks ago now, that looked at what we had wrought, if you will, and drew my conclusions, which were that our failure of strategic patience, not for the first time, had led to the point we were at with the total rout of the Afghan government and its security forces, and had the gravest implications for the security of the region, internationally, and our own security, quite frankly, here at home. How did that come to be? There's an irony in this, of course, that my very first congressional visitor back in January of 2002 was Senator Joe Biden, then chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He came out for a 2 or 3 day visit. And for those of you who know anything about how Congress works abroad on its missions, that is an incredibly long time. But he wanted to see it, he wanted to understand it, wanted to be sure he was getting a feel for it, given his role as committee chair. One of the things we did together was go visit a girls' school. USAID had identified that as a critical need, given that the Taliban deprived girls of a chance for education. And we visited a first grade class. You had 6-year-olds, but you also had 12-year-olds who had come of school age when the Taliban took control, and that was it for female education. Chairman Biden was incredibly positive about the whole thing, exactly what we should be doing. That long-term security for America rests in long-term stability in a place like Afghanistan, a climate, a society in which it would be impossible for Al-Qaeda to take hold again. That, of course, is extremely long-term. And that is where, of course, the problem of American strategic patience kicks in. Not for the first time, as I said earlier. And impatience can be a good quality. I mean, impatience really built our great country. Get her done, drive on, head west, go, go, go. But in the international arena, that kind of impatience, more a liability than an asset. And it certainly was, as we saw in Afghanistan. The lesson that our adversaries and our allies had drawn over the years from dealing with this was, boy, I tell you, if the United States military, the greatest military on earth, is coming your way, put up enough of a resistance so it's respectable, and just get the hell out of the way. Take off the uniform, get the Kalashnikov under a bed, and just say nothing but us poor farmers here, which is pretty much what the Taliban did. And remember, they faced us in battle. They lost in battle. They gave up Afghanistan, if you will, rather than give up Al-Qaeda. That relationship was more important to the Taliban leadership than holding on to power in Afghanistan. And again, we gave them that choice. Why is that significant? Well, the band is back. We have now put together that band that brought us the World Trade Center and Pentagon concert. The same Taliban, and coming with them, the same Al-Qaeda. They have not gotten kinder and gentler in the interim. 2 long decades for them of wandering in the wilderness, and now they're back. And we have already seen the presence of Al-Qaeda in a way we didn't before. Osama bin Laden's head of security is now back in Nangarhar province in eastern Afghanistan, the city of Jalalabad. He didn't exactly make it a secret, announced his homecoming, and lots of their folks there to cheer his arrival back home. So we can debate about terrorist threats to the United States, theoretically, that it might come from here or over there. And these are important debates to have, but Afghanistan is different. It's not theoretical. Those attacks did come to us from Afghanistan, brought to us by, again, the same deadly duo that are back now, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Lots of wishful thinking out there, I guess, that they're a kinder and gentler Taliban. Yeah, well, not really. If you look at the appointments of the now interim Afghan Taliban government, you see folks like Sirajuddin Haqqani, the leader of the lethal Haqqani network that had the closest ties with Al-Qaeda. Well, he's now the Minister of Interior. And of course, in Afghanistan, as in much of the world, the Ministry of Interior does not look on and oversee national parks. Interior means interior security, defined very broadly and often having a lot to do with lethal force. So that's what's back. That's what Afghans, the world, the US are going to have to deal with going forward. This is a gift that's going to keep on giving, unfortunately. President Trump paved the road to this extraordinary defeat when he authorized direct negotiations between the Taliban and the United States without the government of Afghanistan present. Long-term precondition, if you will, from the Taliban, effectively saying, we the Taliban will talk to you Americans, but we're not going to talk to your puppet, the Afghan government. We conceded that point, and in so doing, completely delegitimized the Afghan government and its security forces. Delegitimized and demoralized. And I said it publicly at the time, these are not peace talks. These are surrender talks. We're getting out. That was the only reason to do it. So it was President Trump who put us on this road. And lest anyone miss the subtlety here, at one stage in these talks, he basically forced the government of Afghanistan to release 5,000 Taliban prisoners, who of course then immediately rejoined the fight against that same government and its security forces. We had constructed or helped construct an Afghan military based on our own. That was not a great idea. It meant that in conflict situations, and all of Afghanistan was that, they would be forward deployed, which required that they be sustained by air, both for supplies and for close air support in the event of attacks on government garrisons farther afield. Well, it works for us. Afghanistan is not us. And what that meant, of course, in their case, the only way that air power and presence could be generated was very heavy reliance on American contractors. So that when President Biden decided we're going, well, that didn't just mean our uniformed troops, it meant also those contractors. So all of a sudden, boy, they did not know how to maintain those aircraft. They could certainly fly them. They couldn't maintain them. And we saw support for the troops just kind of fall off the cliff there. They were not getting, they weren't getting food. They weren't getting medevacs. They weren't getting close air support. They weren't getting ammunition. So in a sense, it was the United States really who kind of handed Afghanistan over to the Taliban. It is hard to imagine any force continuing to fight when their essential backer has basically gone over to the enemy. So the surprise should not have been the collapse of the Afghan security forces, only the timing that came more quickly than anyone might have imagined. So now what? I'll just make a strategic point and then a more narrow and immediate point that I think also has tremendous salience. The Taliban victory has allowed them to style it as the forces of the faithful, clad only in the armor of the one true God and his prophet, prevailed against the infidels on the field of battle. They are marketing that for all it's worth. And it is invigorating radical Muslim movements everywhere around the world. And that is going to be one consequence of all of this, sadly. Where I think we're going to see it most acutely is in Pakistan, which has already had a problem with the Pakistani Taliban, so-called, that aim at regime change, not in Afghanistan, but in Pakistan itself. True as well for the jihadi groups that the state of Pakistan created at the time of independence as a means of driving India from the Kashmir area. Yes, the Pakistanis did create them, they then lost control of them. Those groups too are going to be hugely invigorated. So again, this is a strategic problem. We're going to see more and more violence and instability in Pakistan. Some could argue that given their support for the Afghan Taliban, they richly deserve this. But what it does is shake the stability of a country of 220 million people that has nuclear weapons. So watch that space. It's going to get really, really interesting. The other point I'd make is really on US credibility. As I said before, we had the strategic impatience problem already. That we get tired and we go home. If we can't get that clean, definitive victory over whatever it is, then to heck with it. We don't need it. We'll go home. That had already caused our allies to fear our impatience, that they would be left in the lurch, and our adversaries to count on it. Again, not new, and not even new in Afghanistan. The Taliban has attributed to them a great one-sentence zinger. You Americans, you have the watches. We, the Taliban, we have the time. And they proved it. They outlasted us. So we're going to see this ripple through the region and the world, and it will increase threat levels, including from Afghanistan, substantially. At the same time that the closure of our presence means we're not going to have the quality of intelligence that we have over the last couple of decades. So more danger, less capacity to understand the exact nature of that danger. The final point I'd make here, of course, is it wasn't just American strategic interests that have been harmed by President Biden's decision to embrace the Afghan policy of President Trump, also American values. Remember those girls that I told you about? I hope you do. It's pretty clear President Biden didn't. We told the females of Afghanistan, you step forward, get an education, move into politics, get elected to parliament, become business entrepreneurs, join the military. We've got your back. And they did all those things. And now we don't have their backs anymore. That was then, and this is now, and we've been here too long, and goodbye, good luck. So I think we have impugned our own values in Afghanistan, and unnecessarily so, sadly. That leads me to the final point that LJ already referred to. I am on the advisory board of a group called No One Left Behind. As the name suggests, our mission has been to bring interpreters for our forces and our civilians, not only interpreters, Afghans who served us in any significant concrete way, to bring them to safety, because again, their support for us had already put them in the gun sights of the Taliban. And we have seen several hundred die over the years because they couldn't get out fast enough. Well, now we have got thousands of them with their families trapped in Afghanistan. We're gone, they're not. And I can tell you, every morning I kind of hate to open my inbox because it's going to be message after message, directly in some cases from Afghans saying, help me, help me. I helped you, help me before they kill me. And we don't have any good answers. And this particular issue, I think, is one that we have got to press the administration on above and beyond anything else. I mean, these are human lives. These are people who risk theirs to help us, and then we pulled out on them. So to find a workable way, a safe way to get these folks out and make that an ongoing national priority is going to be essential, I think, really for the way we perceive ourselves. It certainly will be essential in the way the world perceives us. And right now, it isn't looking too good. We are seen as inconstant, that we're happy to play with other people's lives as long as we protect our own, and that we can't be relied on. That is not a great position or a great power to be in. So as you can see, I've got some certain strong feelings on all of this, and I will now wrap that up, hand it back over to you, Doctor, and look forward to the dialogue.
So, yeah, appreciate it. So there are a bunch of questions in the chat, and I'm hoping to frame them in a discussion that leads to a sort of a normal or a decent narrative about the current state and the future. So, since you were a James Joyce scholar, James Joyce apparently wrote, "Mistakes are the portals of discovery," and hopefully we're in a period of great discovery here. There's been a lot of emotion about whether we should or should not have left. And I'll quote my friend Elliot Ackerman a few times about a recent article he wrote where he said, "The war didn't change me, it made me." And I started my Navy service in July of 2001, so it resonates with me. I'd be curious, when we think about the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan, which is preventing a negative, if we were to stay there, let's just take that theoretical for a moment, what would you have liked to have seen if we stayed? And what would have been our strategic imperatives to stay?
So the period I was ambassador, 2011 and 2012, marked kind of the high tide of the surge, the Afghan troop surge. There were close to 100,000 troopers there when I left in 2012. What we saw in the out years was that number come down pretty consistently and pretty dramatically. And yet nothing too material changed on the ground. For example, Afghanistan has 34 provinces and provincial capitals. During my tenure there, the Taliban held none of them, zero. By the time the second Obama administration concluded, we had about 15,000 there, plus a substantial number of NATO forces for whom the Afghanistan mission was seen as definitely a positive. It allowed their forces to get some pretty valuable experience, and it was also a reason for the continuance of the NATO mission post-Soviet Union. So that was pretty dramatic that we could hold that line with the Afghan security forces and essentially move into really an advisory role. We ended combat operation years ago. Our troops are there to advise and assist and for counterterrorism missions. Yet the Taliban still were not able to take over a provincial capital and hang on to it. And that persisted all the way down to the beginning of these negotiations between the Trump administration and the Taliban. And we went like 18 months without a single combat fatality. So, it's a critical point. Sure, we don't want our troopers in harm's way. Goodness knows we don't. But we also understand, and they understand far better, that sometimes you have got to deploy forces to deal with a critical national security threat, and Afghanistan was one of those. So I also understand all the issues on corruption. A huge problem in Afghanistan, as it was in Iraq, and two very dissimilar situations, but the theme of corruption runs through them both. A lot of that is on us, quite frankly, to pump in huge amounts of cash into a broken society without respected institutions and obeying the rule of law, because there isn't a rule of law. You're going to get corruption. I got that. But remember, our job wasn't to eliminate corruption. Our job was to keep America safe. And if we do that with, say, 5,000 troops, if that is enough, again, just an advisory role to keep the Taliban from holding a provincial capital, I would say that's a pretty good insurance policy, and definitely an affordable one. And of course, in the chaos of our withdrawal when it came, and collapse of Afghan security forces, in one awful moment, we lose 13 killed in action, 11 Marines, a Navy corpsman, and 1 soldier. Well, that was the total killed in action over the last 4 years, and we do it in one day. So, there it is. We, in my view, had a strategic necessity to remain in Afghanistan. We could do it at a an affordable price. And most importantly, we could give cover for that critical societal change, keeping those girls in school, keeping the door open for young Afghans of both genders to appreciate what a free media can look like, and free access to information and free speech. You see these incredibly brave demonstrations now by unarmed protesters against the Taliban, who is swinging their rifle butts at them. That they are ready to stand up suggests the societal change that was in progress. Well, we backed out of that now. And the Afghan people, young people, girls and women in particular, are going to pay the price for us for this. And ultimately, we'll pay too. I'm not sure how, I'm not sure when. May not be my generation, may not be the children of your generation, it may be their children. But this one is going to come home to us through, again, the perception of American weakness and impatience and indecision, and the perception of an Islamic militancy that they actually can take the field, because they just did it in Afghanistan.
So Ambassador Crocker, I'd love to get into the cost of war in a moment, but you hit on this earlier, and I thought maybe we could hone in on this point of what is the threat to the United States from Afghanistan moving forward, and is it as a host of terrorism? Is it as a disabling force to Pakistan? Is it as a resource for China, or is it as you just described, a key example of the erosion of U.S. leadership authority?
Yeah, it's all of those except the Chinese, the China part of it. China's got to be worried about its own domestic situation, having launched an all-out campaign of oppression and suppression of its Muslim communities in the West, the Uyghurs. They've got to be pretty concerned how the U.S. defeat, as it is perceived in Afghanistan, is going to impact their own disaffected population. And of course, they're the ones who disaffected that population through their treatment of them. And again, China's a great power. We're a greater power. And what that means is we have a complex set of issues in that relationship. And in the case of Afghanistan, and I would suggest also Pakistan, we don't worry about China doing too much. We have consistently been worried about them doing too little. Example, in Afghanistan, they got this huge copper concession. We were okay with that. We're not really in the overseas copper mining business anymore. But part of the deal was they would build road and rail links that obviously would be important for the mining, but also would improve strategic communications throughout Afghanistan for the benefit of the people economically, and to the government by being able to move its security forces by road. They haven't done it. So again, in the odd world we live in, the China issue is one where we would like to see them do more of the right thing. Let's see if their fear of impacts on the Uyghur community will bring that about.
Yes, interesting thought on how China plays in that space. So again, going back to Elliot's recent piece in Foreign Affairs on Winning Ugly, one of the things he talks about is the opportunity cost of the last 20 years in Afghanistan. And I've heard you speak to this several times about the reason we went was counterterrorism and preventing attacks. But I think there's little doubt that the mechanism by which we did that over 20 years transitioned into a heavy investment, something on the order of 2.2 to 2.5 trillion. But in addition to the funds, distractions from other key issues, perhaps climate change, infrastructure, China's emergence. I think back to Foreign Affairs in the 2000, early 2001, when I first got my subscription, and it was all about the emergence of China. What do you think is really the opportunity cost of how we played this out in the last decade in Afghanistan?
Well, that always makes me smile a little bit. We are still the greatest power on earth, and the notion that that with 5 or 10,000 troops more than matched by NATO, that is an unbearable burden for us, and that it significantly detracts from both our attention to dangers and opportunities elsewhere and our capacity to deal with them. That's just laughable. It is certainly the case that in the discussions and the decisions on what we would do to help Afghanistan produce a long-term stable society, we made some pretty significant mistakes. Again, we have a responsibility for that wholesale corruption because of the amount again of money we were pouring into an undeveloped country. Large infrastructure projects almost never a good idea. Let me just put it that way. The projects that are the most significant over time actually are the cheapest. That would be education and healthcare. And we've seen Afghanistan make considerable progress in both areas. I mean, life expectancy is up more than 10 years from what it was when we knocked off the Taliban. And we've seen the results of the education that, when I got there in 2002, there were, let's say, effectively, take it back to late '01, no girls in school whatsoever, and less than 1 million boys in anything that we would consider resembling the school. And now it's like 8 million and 35% of them are girls. So relatively speaking, these are not expensive projects, certainly way cheaper than infrastructure, but far more effective over the long term if you have the patience to let them build the momentum that will make it very hard for anyone to reverse. And we just ran out of patience.
I think that's a great point. It's always scary when doctors speak about economics, but the difference between sunk cost, opportunity cost, and future ongoing costs, I think is important here, because people can look at the number and say, we've spent all this money, but the ongoing cost of security is lower. So just, again, combining some questions from Chip and Steve and Oleg, let's transition to the Taliban. So a week ago, when I was thinking about these questions, I prepped who is the new Taliban 20 years later? So much has changed. Are the same people? They've made that very clear yesterday that they are, or at least that they have not abandoned some of their principles. So as a career diplomat, how do you engage with the Taliban right now? How would you sit down, engage with them, negotiate, manage, ideally shape what the Taliban does over the next 1 month, 12 months, 5 years?
We have been, of course, in this disastrous negotiation with the Taliban that gave us what we're facing today. After the fall of Kabul, we were engaged with the Taliban on some very narrow issues, very tactical issues, related to getting our folks out and the Afghan special immigrant visa applicants who needed to get out, to get them out. Well, we didn't do such a great job on that either. And there are thousands, as I said earlier, there are thousands of Afghans and their family members who's served us and served us well, who we have to assume are on the Taliban hit list. And we got to find a way to safely extract those people who want to go, as well as 100 or more of our own citizens. And we need to keep that in front of the Taliban. If you go after these people, or if you will not guarantee their safe passage, you're going to hear from us, not kinetically, I wouldn't think, but in other ways. And we do have some levers. It's a poor country. It's always been a poor country. Well, they had about $10 billion in the Federal Reserve System. That's all frozen. This regime isn't going to touch it until we say they can touch it. So we've got some leverage here. We need to apply it carefully, thoughtfully, and in full consultation with our partners in NATO. And again, with President Biden, the return of American leadership in the world, the the nation that will work with its allies. We didn't even consult with NATO. We out-Trumped Trump in that department, in the sense that since this was not a drawdown but a full withdrawal, they had to scramble pretty hard and pretty quick to get their own troops out. And they are not exactly pleased with us at the moment. So by consulting on steps forward with the Taliban, and I'll give credit to the administration where it's due, that, for example, Secretary Blinken has been jetting around the region, talking to our traditional Arab partners, but also convening with his German counterpart a major consultation on Afghanistan and what's next. That makes sense. This should not all be on us. We need to be talking to our allies, and we need to overcome the image we have now of being a declining and a force that just does not consult with others. That was the rap on the Trump administration. And again, Biden has out-Trumped Trump. So I think talking to others about the Taliban and what they should or could or shouldn't or couldn't do, it needs to be a collective effort here, to the extent we can make it so. And the main levers we've got are financial. They need money and we've got it, they don't. But when you look at what the Taliban is doing politically, well, the center of government they've announced does not suggest it is a kinder, gentler Taliban. The opposite. To see Sirajuddin Haqqani, the leader of the Haqqani network, emerge as Minister of Interior, this is not encouraging. Again, the band is back. Those who are have been named a high office in the center of government, we know who they are because they were the guys who were running the show in the 90s. So it's better together. And I think that we are the United States of America, and we will be forgiven a lot if we make it clear that whatever was the case in the past, we're now moving forward in partnership with our key allies and have a collective approach. So that certainly is what I would be suggesting.
Ambassador Crocker, this will reveal some of my biases and hopefully it won't sound too negative. And my goal is that you give us hope on the answer to this question. So I, like many people on this in this community, believe that American exceptionalism has to do with our potential to do good things. And I just want to ask you about whether we actually can lead. And what you just highlighted is the decision not to consult NATO. The Department of State failed dramatically with the SIV process. The DoD and the intel community basically failed to anticipate the Taliban's rapid takeover of the country. And now, as we look at resettling 50 to 75 to 100,000 Afghans in the United States, it's clear that the domestic systems and institutions are also teetering on the brink of not being able to execute. So give us hope. Give us hope in our institutions. What do we need to do to step back up and to lead domestically and internationally in this space?
Well, we kind of need to see American presidents stop saying, in effect, tell me where my people are going so I can lead them. We have not exactly seen a robust use of the bully pulpit of the presidency by this president. He's used it way more than he thought he ever would on Afghanistan, but he has not exactly risen to the occasion here in creating a positive vision. Now, I think there are some positives here from what I gather. There is a lot of support by red states and blue, by Democrats and Republicans together, a lot of support for welcoming large numbers of Afghan refugees. It is a moral obligation, but from the bit I've seen, it is one that the Americans across the board have really have embraced. And certainly refugees and in particular this class of refugees who are refugees because of what they did for us, that's crucial. I'm here in Spokane County. The county is pretty reliably red. Well, we host World Relief here, one of the resettlement agencies for the United States. There are 9 of them nationally. And boy, you know, any Afghans who want to find a nice, welcoming climate to build their new future, you just send them to Spokane County. We will take care of them because we know that, like those who came before, they're going to be positive, productive members of our society. So I would start there. Sadly, President Biden has not said a single word about refugees and gearing up to support them. And again, my own organization, No One Left Behind, that's where our attention now is shifting. We're going to keep the heat on the government to be sure they do what they have got to do to avoid further betraying our own values to get the folks out. But we're geared up now for substantial inputs on this end when they arrive. So that's where I'd start. And I would not start again by being self-defeating. You know, we are America. We are still the most powerful nation on earth. We have always seen ourselves as a force for good. Well, let's show it. You know, let's use this awfulness to say we got that wrong, but here's what we're going to get right. We're gonna fix the situation we've created, and then we're going to move forward on other issues. And we're going to do it in not as a dominating power, but simply as a leading power. But, because the problem with the world, as the president has said on other occasions, the world doesn't run by itself. You know, when you look back a bit historically, the end of World War II saw the dawning of America's global role in peace, peace building, peacemaking. You know, we created the institutions of the post-war world, and we led them. The United Nations, NATO, the Bretton Woods Agreement on a new economic order, new financial order. That's the America we need to be right now. The challenge isn't that the Chinese are going to replace us. They're not. The problem is they can't. No one can. And so if we're going to move away from this long era of American leadership, what happens next? Well, we revert to a balance of power system where regional powers will have more clout than they might otherwise have, given that they are regional, not international. It'll get very complicated. And when it gets out of balance, really bad things happen, like, say, World War I, World War II, the Holocaust. World War II and the Holocaust are still in living memory. And that came to us from a balance of power world. So this is a fateful choice. If we don't lead, no one will. And that is far worse, in my view, than a rival power who could step into that role. So, you know, maybe we've gotten complacent. And if we have, good to remember the first half of the last century. Is that the world we want? A balance of power world that can tip over the edge because suddenly it becomes unbalanced? I would hope not. We need a presidential voice to lay this out for the American people.
Bringing the glimmer of hope. I appreciate it, sir. So, thankfully, President Biden finally picked someone yesterday to lead the efforts. And I don't know Lee Waleski, but sounds like he's quite accomplished. Thank you for sticking around for a couple more minutes. I wanted to end on the resettlement piece, which you just started to get to, which is a future-facing opportunity for us to really demonstrate who we are. And there are several questions from anonymous attendees to this topic about what can we do, what should we do. So perhaps if you don't mind, just a little bit more about No One Left Behind, and then your thoughts on how we as citizens can engage in this process. I just want to preface this by saying 2 recent polls nationally have shown bipartisan support for Afghan resettlement in the 70s to 80% range. So this particular group of refugees has strong bipartisan support. So how can we engage, sir? How can we help these individuals and help our country moving forward?
No, it's a great question, and it is forward-looking, and it is an area in which there, as you point out, there's been strong bipartisan support. So let's build on it. Clearly, what is most needed is what's most needed everywhere for anything: money. The federal government provides certain levels of funding for refugee resettlement. It's not a lot. The voluntary agencies need to try to pick up that slack, and they can only do it through donations and contributions. So I would urge anyone who sees this as both a humanitarian challenge and a strategic challenge, and I believe obviously that it is both, step up, contribute to one of the resettlement agencies if you have the wherewithal, and whether you do or you don't, be in touch with those in your area who are involved in this, and volunteer your time. It's a moment of opportunity for these Afghan SIVs and other Afghan refugees, but it's also very frightening and highly disruptive. I mean, they're not in Afghanistan anymore. It is a completely different culture. So volunteer your time to help introduce our latest arrivals to the wonder that is America. So everybody can do something, and this is again a case where our national security interests and our American values do coincide. Doing the right thing by people who risk their lives to do the right thing by us, that should be a no-brainer. And I'm very glad to see that the American people seem to think so too.
Well, thank you, sir. This fascinating conversation, and really appreciate your historical perspective, and then also your insights into the current state and the potential future state. I'll just end by offering you the opportunity if you'd like to make any quick closing statements, and then we'll hand it back off to Wayne Cooper. But thank you again for the time. We very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and as always, just really great questions from you, of course, but from the audience out there. I would just say, after you've given all you can possibly give to the resettlement effort, then give something more to the World Affairs Council. And you can actually write both checks at the same time, because as I said at the outset, we are in volatile, dangerous times. And we have an urgent need as Americans to understand why, to understand what the options are, to understand what the consequences could be of whatever option that one pushes. I saw this happen in Iraq. In the elections of 2002, the American people voted to have a big old war in Iraq. By 2006, they were voting not to have a big old war in Iraq. But you can't rewind the film. So again, we all have the imperative to educate ourselves on what is happening in the world and what it means for us, for our families, for our communities, for our nation, and for our future. And given the sad decline in numbers of international correspondents, probably 10% what they were when I was in Beirut in the early 80s, the time of the Marine and embassy bombings, our ability to understand that world is diminished. And that's where, again, the World Affairs Councils are so important. So support yours. It is a leading institution in the country, and do all you can to educate yourself on what happens beyond our borders, because as we've seen, what happens in Afghanistan, it didn't stay in Afghanistan.
Well, as one honorary Marine to another, Semper Fi, sir. Appreciate all you continue to do for our country and our community. Wayne Cooper, back over to you, LJ.
Actually, LJ will jump in, and then Wayne, I'm sorry. Thank you so very much. I urge you all to read Ambassador Crocker's most recent New York Times op-ed. It was on August 21st, 2021. Why Biden's lack of strategic patience led to disaster. We did have it in our invitation. We have it in our chat box. So if you're interested, and I'm sure you are, please do read it. I want to thank Dr. David Calloway He's the Chief Crisis Operation and Sustainability at Atrium Health, Department of Emergency Medicine, Carolinas Medical Center. Thank you, David, for leading this conversation so ably. And again, I've been on the ground. I've seen Ambassador Crocker, but for a very short time in action. I remember well when we were there with the young woman you were honoring for their work and the promises that we made them, and they stepped forward. The women of Afghanistan, and again, I was there for a short period, impressed me so very much. The meeting with the Minister of Health, a woman who told us about her life under the Taliban and how much we helped them. Meeting the parliamentarians, the 22% of the Afghanistan parliament are women, thanks to the work of Ambassador Crocker. The general, the first woman general in the Afghan army, the students at the business school, the American school, university in Kabul, but most importantly, the ladies, the women that you were honoring at the embassy. And I do remember that one of them was actually had to be whisked away because the Taliban were so annoyed with the work they were doing that they actually were had an operation of kidnapping and eliminating her. So I've seen it myself. I've seen you in action. It is such a great honor to be with you today and to listen to your words of wisdom and expertise. We do hope for a better future for the people of Afghanistan. We do hope we'll have resettle as many as we can in this country that deserve and that helped us there. And we hope to see you, Ambassador Crocker, in Charlotte once this pandemic is hopefully behind us. Having said that, it was a great pleasure. Wayne Cooper, the chairman of the board of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. Wayne.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for that great plug for the World Affairs Council. But what a great presentation. And you really gave us a lot to think about. You know, we always say that we have timely programs, but boy, this is very, very timely, as was your great New York Times op-ed page. And incidentally, for those of you that didn't see the op-ed piece that Ambassador Crocker did, get a hold of us and we'll get a copy out to you. I want to give a huge thank you to LJ and the staff for really continuing to come up with these great topics and speakers. Charlotte, Noah, Madison, thank you all. Remember, if you aren't a member of the World Affairs Council, please become one. You know, if you are a member, consider upgrading your membership. You know, your membership helps LJ and the staff to really bring you these excellent, excellent programs. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting until our next presentation. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Take care.
Thank you, Ambassador Crocker. Thank you, everyone participating. Thank you.